High oil and gas prices as a result of the American war with Iran do not make Canadian oil, gas, and LNG projects more likely. But oil and gas companies will profit off of the price speculation that's happening at the expense of Canadians and the resulting inflation that we experience in prices. Proposed oil pipelines, gas, and LNG projects are years away from being developed, and current shocks in prices are actually likely to reduce demand for oil and gas in the future by convincing oil and gas consuming countries to shift to cheaper and more stable renewable energy faster than they were before. Experts such as Microsoft's energy chief and energy writers like Max Fawcett have already pointed this out. The International Energy Agency still expects oil demand to plateau around 2030, contrary to what you might have heard, due to the global shift to renewable energy. And there are already enough oil and gas projects globally to meet that demand, making new proposed projects in Canada unviable. So recent oil and gas price volatility brought on by American foreign policy, as well as American actions to cut off oil supplies to Cuba, are likely to convince oil and gas consuming countries to transfer to renewable energy at an even faster rate than that, because renewables paired with battery storage and grid solutions provide localized, reliable, and cheap energy that outcompetes oil and gas right now, let alone with high oil and gas prices. And because baseload power is no longer an obstacle in that regard, renewables paired with battery storage really gets around that problem. But the following three outcomes are likely, and these are the things to watch for. The price of fossil fuels in Canada will rise, increasing the cost of living, but this is only partially because of supply shocks due to the situation in Iran. It's actually largely because of speculation. In other words, oil and gas corporations will make a lot of profit off Canadians via inflated prices that are only partially the result of actual supply problems. This speculation was what really happened after Russia invaded Ukraine, and it helped cost Canadians $12,000 per household. You can find out more about that at falseprofits.ca. I'll put a link in the description. As economist Jim Stanford pointed out recently, the gasoline in the pumps right now was refined weeks ago, before all of this started. Here's the second thing that will happen. Oil and gas interests will use price increases to try to pitch massive new oil and gas and LNG, that's liquefied natural gas projects, even though those projects take years to come online. And they're really betting that you won't do the math on the years. There will be plenty of vague statements that will come from politicians, like the world needs our oil and gas. But again, new oil and gas and LNG projects like Slism's LNG or a West Coast oil pipeline still don't have a business case. Price volatility and fluctuations in the short term are not a business case for projects that need decades and decades of demand that already was not going to be there and definitely is not going to be there now. I mean, remember all the LNG projects that were going to be necessary to help Europe because of what was happening in Ukraine, the LNG projects in Canada that never happened because they never had a business case and still don't. And again, that brings us back to point number three. When oil and gas prices rise, oil and gas consuming nations and regions speed up their transition to renewable energy because renewables are the cheapest form of energy and already outcompete oil and gas. Because countries are electrifying and because battery and grid systems mean renewables no longer need that base load power to be applied locally. That makes oil and gas and LNG projects in Canada less likely, not more. A majority of Canadians connect oil and gas dependence with instability, as well they should, and believe renewable energy would strengthen Canadian sovereignty. A new opinion poll from February 2026 found that 67% of Canadians say reliance on oil and gas increases the risk of international conflict. 59% of Canadians believe Canada would be safer if it produced more renewable energy in light of US aggression towards Venezuela and Greenland. 58% say transitioning away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy is more important than ever. Only 11% of Canadians say it's less important. So Canadians are also strongly opposed to foreign aggression to secure access to natural resources. 70% say it's completely unacceptable for one country to use military force to take control of another country's resources. 72% say it would be unacceptable for the United States to have arrested Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to access oil reserves. 80% say it would be unacceptable for the United States to seize Greenland for its natural resources. Additional polling that was done by Abacus Data found that 70% of the public would feel pride if Canada were to become a renewable energy superpower versus only 30% feeling that way about becoming an oil and gas superpower. And what's interesting is that these results include a majority of Albertans, 56%, who preferred renewable energy superpower over oil and gas superpower, and 79% of people living in Newfoundland and Labrador preferred renewable energy superpower over an oil and gas superpower. Donald Trump has already said that he wants to see oil prices go lower than ever before once his war on Iran ends. Now, that isn't very reliable, but I think it speaks to the price volatility that you're seeing and the likelihood that that volatility will continue. Again, no country is watching what's happened in Cuba and saying, oil and gas is great to rely upon as an energy source. Countries around the world are going to be looking at this situation and saying, how do we get cheap energy that is reliable, that we can locally produce? And the answer to that is renewables, battery storage grids. Even China is not overly concerned with what is happening in Iran because they know already and have been working to corner the renewable energy economy. That's where they see the future being. And it would behoove us in Canada to not only invest in renewable energy, but to do so in a way that prioritizes oil and gas dependent regions so that we can make sure that there is an alternative to oil and gas employment, oil and gas revenue for people there by building renewable options locally. You can go to the link in the description to find sources for everything I've said here. You can read what Microsoft's energy chief said and what writers like Max Fawcett have said. I would also encourage you to go to falseprofits.ca and see some of the economic work that's been done analyzing the impact of these volatile price increases on Canadian consumers. But most of all, go out and talk to other people about this. Help counter the spin. We do not need Canada to go down the path of investing in a bunch of useless oil, gas, and LNG projects when that money is really desperately needed to make us a renewable energy economy that's actually beneficial for people in the future. Before we end today, just a reminder that you can take action on environmental issues by visiting sierraclub.ca. We have tons of petitions, other actions and events, and regular news updates you can sign up for on the homepage. You can also find Sierra Club Canada on social media, and you can listen to the Environment in Canada podcast on the Harbinger Media Network, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast also airs on CKUT Broadcast Radio in Montreal, 90.3 FM, bi-weekly on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget to click follow or subscribe to get the latest episodes from us.